Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Thank you so much for staying on for our final interview of the day. It's with Alana Mathews, who's running for Sacramento County District Attorney, and I believe Alana is here in the chat. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me.
And nice to meet you as well. My name is Curran Hamilton. I'm just going to be the facilitator for today, so I'll be asking you questions, and I'll also be cutting you off if the time gets there. So don't take any offense when I speak up and say, "Oh, you've run out of time." And to go over the time, you have 25 minutes total. 5 minutes. We'd like you to do an introduction of yourself, and also after you've done that little bit about yourself, explain the position you're running for and the responsibilities that that position has. I'll hand it right over to you.
Thank you again for allowing me to have this opportunity and for consideration of endorsing me as a candidate. I began my career, almost 20 years ago as a deputy DA here in Sacramento County. I spent a total of 10 years, 2 years as an intern, and then as a line prosecutor, going from misdemeanors to juvenile hall to domestic violence, preliminary hearing, superior court review, felony trial team, where I tried some very serious and violent cases, including a home invasion robbery and an attempt murder. I then also worked with some of the collaborative courts, including our Veterans Court. We have a program called Stand Down, where we work with homeless veterans to kind of clear up any outstanding cases that they have. I've also worked with our firearms calendar, which is a very unique calendar, but people just don't need an attorney. They just want to petition the courts. I've also worked with our homeless loaves and fishes calendar. And then I was assigned to what we call our prison crime unit. So actually crimes that happen inside of prison. I left in 2012 to start the enforcement unit of the California Energy Commission. And within a year, I actually was appointed the public attorney for that particular agency. So that promoted me to an executive level leadership position. I was appointed by Governor Brown. And in that role, I really got to drive organizational change. That means when you look around an organization and you see problems, you see things that are wrong, you have the opportunity to fix it. And in my situation, it was not diverse at all. And there was a lot of, not just diversity in like the ethnicity, but the diversity of thought. So we had a lot of interest in energy policy, environmental justice, but we didn't have a lot of people who had experienced that. And so that's one of the things that I did is I created the agency's equity initiative. I worked with all the units, all of their deputy directors to create performance metrics. So I went from serving victims of crime to vulnerable communities who had experienced energy injustice or environmental injustice. From there, I did a lot of great work to change the policy of the state, got the attention of the legislature. So the speaker offered me a position as the chief consultant of climate change. So I expanded that equity work to look at all of the climate policies, programs, and investments of the state to make sure they were benefiting all of Californians, people who live in this state. It's just unacceptable that we had 1 million people in the state that did not have clean drinking water. We knew about what was going on in Flint, Michigan, but not in California, or that we have people live completely off the grid. They have to heat their homes by burning wood and they're inhaling all of those fumes. So I was glad to work across the state to address those. Of course, air quality monitoring, providing oversight to the Air Resources Board to make sure that we're serving all Californians. So that's the skill set that I bring to the DA's office. I think the way that I have driven equity and better solutions for the most marginalized communities is what's needed in the new direction for the district attorney. We have a system that's not serving everybody and it's failing to keep communities safe. And so we need someone who not only knows the work of the office, but understands how to create solutions of how the work of the office is actually not protecting communities and it's failing to actually provide safety for everybody. And with that, I will be happy to answer questions and share a little bit more about my story.
Fantastic, and thank you so much. If I can just ask a little bit of follow-up there, I'd like you to delve a little bit more into what, and just a tiny bit more, what is this position, and what responsibilities does it have besides just within, as you mentioned, making reformative change within the department?
Yeah, so the district attorney is actually the top law enforcement official for the county, similar to how the attorney general for the state is sort of the top law enforcement official for the state. So in the county, any criminal law that is being prosecuted will come from the district attorney's office if it is a violation of state code. Now, of course, our penal code system. There are other, kind of regulatory agencies that, do some form of prosecution. But when we're talking about crimes, violations of the penal code, or if it's juveniles, the welfare institution code, the DA's office is responsible for charging and trying those cases and coming up with sentencing. After a trial has happened, depending on how it ends up, obviously, if it's not guilty, you can't retry that case because that's double jeopardy. But if it's a mistrial, the DA makes a decision of whether or not they should retry the case. If there is a conviction and sentencing, if that person is up for parole, the DA's office does have a role in weighing in on whether or not a person should be released or whether or not they should. We would object to early release. There's also a role in diversion programs. So before someone enters into or sets a trial, if they have mental illness or substance abuse, they have the opportunity to go into a diversion program. And it's called diversion because it's diverting someone away from kind of the carceral system and trying to get treatment and services. One of the things that I feel that the DA's office should have that it currently does not have is that it is steeped in reacting to crime. And my vision and why I'm running is because I think you just can't have reactive approaches. You have to have preventive and intervention strategies because some people will not engage in the criminal justice system. I am a survivor of crime, racial violence, gun violence, and even domestic violence. And in all three of those instances, charges were not brought. In the first two, gun violence and racial violence, the police weren't even called. There was no level of accountability. So I couldn't depend on the criminal justice system to give me a sense of justice or closure. But there are many people, either because of distrust, language barriers, experiences, maybe they're immigrant, they come from a community that they don't trust the police, they don't get involved. So I think the role of the DA's office has to be expanded to understand where those people are and has to work towards safety, whatever that means, however that means for all the citizens in Sacramento County. So just one other thing I'll say is usually when a crime happens, people call the police file a report, or even if you get a ticket, the police stop you, they write you a citation, that gets brought to the DA's office. Sometimes the DA's office will look at that report or that citation, they'll decline to prosecute. Sometimes they will move forward. So that's kind of procedurally how things normally happen.
Good to hear, good to hear. And thank you for explaining all of that. I think it's helpful for all of us who don't necessarily know the intricacies of how the criminal justice system works. But speaking to how that system works and diverting people away from being inside that carceral system, the Sacramento County's DA office is funded 4 times more than the public defender's office. Would you advocate that these two departments receive a more balanced funding? And do you support the People's Budget campaign in Sacramento and their priority on participatory budgeting?
Yes, I absolutely. I think one of the foundations that motivated me to run to office is, it's one thing to talk about the failures of the system, but it's something totally different about what are the solutions. And one of the solutions is opening up the system, opening up for more voices, more experiences, and more tools to create safety within our criminal justice system. And so having participation, whether it's being in the budgetary process or it's being in understanding how we administer justice. So having ideas like having community courts, bringing in other disciplines to have a multidisciplinary team to work with communities, having embedded prosecutors, working with healthcare professionals, social scientists, psychologists, mental health professionals are all ways where we can improve how we administer justice in our community. As far as advocating for more funding for the Public Defender's Office, I absolutely will. One of the ways where we can open up our system of justice, when you think about the bail issue, we have 2 programs in Sacramento County. They're called the Pretrial Services Program. There are 2 actually that were piloted. One is run by probation and the other one was run by the Public Defender's Office. And my understanding is that the Public Defender's Office had to go and get private funding to help run that. But what that allows is for individuals who have been justice involved, if they have been arrested, there is a deeper dive through pretrial services to understand what are the issues that they have. And I think the public defenders has a great model of being able to do that, so that if people are arrested, they're a low-level offense, we have someone, rather than just a person reading a report, making a quick judgment. The public defender has committed to, and they are actually actively involved in doing a deeper dive into a person's background to see if there's any violence, if they are an actual risk to society, or if they, can secure the likelihood saying, okay, they must probably have a transportation issue, or this person is unhoused, so they're going to need a lot more support to come back to court. So let's not set them up for failure and say you're going to get a notice mailed to you or you have to show up, but they don't actually have transportation. So it's a very holistic approach to ensuring safety, but also ensuring how are we getting the services that we actually need to help keep our community safe. Are we able to look into individuals' background and see if there's substance abuse or if there's mental illness and how we can deal with that? So I would support the funding for that program, particularly the expansion of public defenders, because I understand it's heavily funded privately.
Thank you for that explanation. And just out of curiosity, you mentioned you spent, I think it was 10 years as a DA or an assistant DA. Were you ever a public defender?
No, I was never a public defender. But I will say I had a good relationship. Actually, when I left the office, many public defenders actually gave me a going away party. Oh, so I think that speaks to the level of reasonableness that I had. Yes, but I will say I was an intern for 2 years. So I was actually a prosecutor for 8 years.
Okay, good to know. So other progressive DAs like Chelsea Boudin and Larry Krasner have struggled to achieve the goals against structural constraints in the prosecutor's office. How do you plan to achieve your vision despite these constraints?
Right. So I've really focused on what Sacramento County needs and deserves. And I am glad to see that there has been an overwhelming response to the message of change that I have been standing for in the community. People have been crying out for change. And now that they hear that it's here, they're excited. And so when you go into court as a prosecutor, you state your name, Alana Mathews, for the people. So we all take an oath and we have a responsibility to serve the people of this county. And what the people of this county, as well as the state, have shown is they support and have approved common sense reforms, such as getting mental health services or drug treatment programs for people who are struggling with addictions or substance abuse disorder, or they have a mental illness. So the way I want to address sort of those constraints is, one, recognizing that we work for the people. And we have to make sure that we are keeping the community safe, but we're keeping them safe in the way that the people have shown they support. The second thing that I will say is how I would deal with that is how I've dealt with challenges throughout my career. Even being at the Energy Commission or working in the legislature, people are very passionate about climate issues, but also industry can be very dug in, and it could be a lot of hostility. And so in those situations where maybe we're getting ready to propose a new power plant and you have community members saying, I don't want that in my backyard, and you have marginalized communities saying, we already have 3 power plants, why don't you go put it in a more rich neighborhood instead of dumping all of these, pollutants here in our community. And then you have industry saying, well, hey, we want a more clean energy. This is going to be a cleaner plant. So you have all these different stakeholders with different perspectives. And what I learned to be successful in that area is that I have to lead by values and not by issues. And that's the approach I will take as the next DA for Sacramento County, and opening up the system. We're going to open up the way we do business here, the way we administer justice, and we're going to lead by values. And those values are safety, fairness, and justice. And so when we're asking ourselves that, that's the side you're going to be standing on. Do you want fairness or do you not want fairness? Do you want justice or do you not want justice? Do you want safety or do you not want safety? And for those who stand for those values, we can move forward together.
I love the strong message. Thank you so much. Would you use your office to pursue fossil fuel companies and other polluting entities, or even local agencies, for issuing issues of environmental and climate justice?
So the way that I would phrase that is that, because I guess the way that that question sounds is like, am I going to target any specific individuals? What I will say is I do want to prioritize environmental harms, and that I will target anyone who is committing environmental harms to stop doing that. And not only to hold them accountable for any of the environmental harms that they're causing, but to be an advocate to ensure that we have mitigating measures to mitigate the harm that has been caused. And so if it comes in the form of a civil settlement, making sure the community that's been harmed by that violation and by that pollution, making sure that they receive the benefit, and it's not just, a settlement that goes who knows where. I want to also bring greater accountability to what do we do with those funds? What do we do with those measures when we are seeking those individuals? Because that's important in opening up our system of justice. We have to open it up and make it more transparent, but we also have to open it up to be accountable to community members. And so if you're causing harm, doesn't matter who you are, how much money you make, position you hold, or your corporation title, you have to be held accountable.
That's what we like to hear. To switch gears a little bit, dozens of people were recently on hunger strike in Sacramento County jails to protest dangerous conditions and lack of COVID-19 safety, which is even more of an issue now with the Omicron variant. Would you use the DA's office to investigate conditions in the Sacramento County jails?
Yes, if there's harm being caused in the community, again, it doesn't matter the agency or the position or the title. I think it's important that we make sure the harm is not happening in our communities. I am a member of the Sacramento NAACP, and so I've had several conversations with our president, Betty Williams, who has brought this to my attention. And that's certainly, the criminal justice system is not one-dimensional. And so I think that's what happens usually in politics. Like, we just throw this broad brush and it's like good or bad, right or wrong. It's layered, it's complex, it's nuanced. And so we have to, again, that goes back to the value of safety. And if we have safety as a value in our community, we have to have safety in all of our institutions. And so when we see that there are conditions that are not safe, it's not just about safety of the inmates, but it's safety about the people who work at the jail, the nurses, the staff, the psychologists. We have to make sure we have safe conditions, and that can't happen if we are allowing people who are violating laws or regulations to go unaccounted for.
Thank you. You've mentioned the pretrial release or the diversion programs, but aside from pretrial release, do you support decreasing the Sacramento County jail population?
Yes, what I support is solutions for safety. And so I'm a law professor. I love research and I love data-driven solutions. And so what we have seen is that the data shows us, and this is a study by Anna Harvey at NYU, is that when people first enter the system, for like low-level misdemeanors, some DAs are actually declining some of those low levels because just by introducing someone into the system, you're increasing the likelihood that they're going to continue to interact and be in the system. And so looking at the data to show what types of offenses should a person be incarcerated for. And in this county, the practice has been basically to lock everybody up. So actually, you don't need a lot of research to realize that that is not sustainable. We cannot incarcerate our way to safety. So if we're going to open up the system of justice, we have to open it up to more tools. And one of the tools is mental health crisis. I've actually talked to people who have been impacted by crime. They might, or justice involved, they may get rolled up on a parole violation, but they have a mental illness. So now they are being, maybe on something very minor. The one individual that I talked to, and they talked about how they were in jail and they weren't receiving their medication and their services. And so, or treatment. And so that put them in a more vulnerable state to have more of a psychotic episode, to become more violent, to just break down. And they lost their job. They had a new job that they were just starting. And so it now put them on this kind of like domino effect for all the stability that they have been working for: housing, employment, treatment, and services. And so that's kind of the guiding force and principle behind reducing our population, because we want to look at what's successful, what is again leading to that value of safety, justice, and fairness. And if incarcerating someone is not achieving that, I mean, certainly people who do violent and serious crimes, they need to be separated from society. But other individuals, we can achieve safety or fairness or even justice in other means. So we absolutely have to open the system up to achieve that.
Thank you for that compassionate answer, because that is definitely a tragic story. The Sacramento County Sheriff Department has been documented coordinating releases directly with ICE, releases from the jail directly with ICE, despite Board of Supervisors designating Sacramento a sanctuary county. How would you advocate, I guess, for the end of this practice and use your position as as DA to do anything about this?
Yeah, in the DA's office, I know in the past that has been a coordinated effort also. And this was many, many years ago when I was a prosecutor. We will not, in the DA's office, we will not have a formal relationship with ICE unless it is some, federal immediate danger, safety, harm that's being caused, and maybe there's an overlapping investigation. So with that policy, I definitely would not advocate. I mean, we are a sanctuary city. The DAs and the sheriff, we are elected, so there is the accountability that we have to the public that we serve. But I don't think we have to wait every 4 years for that to happen. So I would certainly be a vocal advocate. And one of the things I intend to do is have an immigration policy. And so, when people are involved in the justice system, we want to make sure that their level of accountability is proportional to the harm, and deportation can be a disproportionate impact. So I want to make sure that we have a very informed immigration policy, and we have attorneys who are very well versed in understanding of immigration consequences, so that that disproportionate impact and level of accountability is not something that is perpetuated by the Sacramento County DA's office.
That is very good to hear. And a follow-up question on that may signal my ignorance of how the system works. How do you determine whether or not the claim from ICE and the federal government that this is a violent criminal is legitimate versus what information you have, I suppose?
Well, I believe that in the instances that I'm thinking about, it would be a multi-agency task force. So let's say we have, a cartel that's, involved. So it is some federal crimes that are involved, but they may have, federal and state agency overlap. And so in that instance, I don't think that we're directly going to be contacting ICE, but I do know that there are international human trafficking rings, and there are, international, drug trafficking as well. And so to the extent that the Sacramento County DA's office is supporting those investigations, it may have a tenuous, or it may have a relationship where ICE can be a part of that. So it would all be clear in the investigation. It's not like I'm saying, oh, well, what do you know? Or what, like, this would be a multi-disciplinary, multi-agency effort.
Thank you for explaining that to me. So I just want to do a time check. We have 5 minutes left. I have one more question that's been voted for, and we have a bunch of other questions after that that we may or may not get to. So the final question, you can take as much time as you want on it. Again, I'll get to the other ones if we have time. On your website, you describe cash bail as fundamentally unfair, and in response say that you will advocate for the expansion of pretrial services, which we've talked about a little bit already. You already mentioned the two different programs, the probation department's pretrial services program, which so far has primarily, it says here, funded armed officers, and the public defenders program, which is social worker and services based. Can you describe a little bit more about those programs and clarify, as you I think already did clarify, but just to reinforce it, which of those two programs you support, and whether those programs would involve law enforcement officers?
So I have a lot more information about the public defenders pretrial services program. So I can only really speak to that, but I definitely will support that because I know it is social services based. I know that when an individual may have difficulties, I mean, one of the things why you have a bail hearing is that you want to have some assurances that the person will come back to court. And I think rather than just making a rash, uninformed decision, the pretrial services program of the public defender's office is one in which they can figure out what are sort of the non-detention alternatives that can secure a person coming back to court. They can also see what are the other supportive services that an individual might need. They can see if they have mental, illness, or they have a substance abuse problem. And so in the interim, if we don't want to hold anyone, if it's appropriate to release them, but with these additional conditions, they're in the best position to find that out. And for the individuals who have either been justice involved, or attorneys or nonprofit organizations such as Justice to Jobs who have been working with these individuals who are, facing, they're impacted by the criminal justice system. They have really advocated and informed me that this program is working very well. So for those reasons, I would advocate. And I don't know that much about the probation department, but if they will have similar kind of social services, they will do the background and provide the alternatives and supportive services of what individuals need, I would support that because I support the effort. So if it's something that both agencies will do, and if it's one that only one agency is doing, that's what I'm supporting, because the decision is really about how are we keeping the community safe.
That's good to hear, and I just want to drill down on an answer there that you had. So if the probation department's pretrial services definitely involve officers, would you not support that program?
You mean police officers or probation officers?
All I have in my notes here is armed officers.
So, I'm not comfortable like making a distinction like between the two just because they have armed, because I mean, pretrial services is to determine what I believe should be the safety, the risk assessment or threat to safety. And so if there is an individual who really does pose a threat, maybe to themselves, maybe not to anyone, any other individual, I think that we need to know that. And so I don't know if I'm misunderstanding the nuances of it, because I'm not trying to evade the question, but I also know that the pretrial services may involve, evaluating someone who poses a serious risk. And so I am unclear about just, saying no or not one way or the other. But what I will communicate is that I support a program that is going to do a thorough background and look at alternatives so that the only answer is not just locking someone up. If there are other conditions that can be put forth in order to release someone, still provide the support that they need to get them back to court or get them the treatment and services, I will support that.
That's good to hear. And I don't think I have the nuance to provide you for that question. Well, I think despite us having a couple other questions, we're almost at the end of our time. Let me see if, let's see if you can make this a very quick answer for yourself. Our current district attorney infamously did not pursue charges against police officers who killed Stephon Clark. As a DA, would you approach police accountability differently?
Yes, I think we have not had police accountability for the death of many citizens. Joseph Mann is a very stark example, and I have already been public about, I've asked the Attorney General to look into that case. I think that we have to have an open system where we're transparent, but also we have to communicate. I mean, there were a lot of things other than not, in a number of different cases where there has been no, accountability, but I don't think that the public has been satisfied in the investigation. And we just don't have any trust, even when our DA comes forward and says, I'm not going to pursue charges. I think the use of force was justified. There's been no trust because there's no transparency. There's like this mystery, the secrecy, and what the evaluation was. And what we saw in the Stephon Clark case was going through all the text messages, and it was really, just a disservice. And even if there was some purpose of, going through whatever his mental health crisis was that he may have been experiencing, it should not have been used to justify the outcome. It should have been used to mark in our moment that we need to take mental health more seriously. And we want to make sure that anybody else who's having a mental health crisis doesn't lose their life. We also have to have a different way of approaching it by not putting up fences, by not cutting off conversations. That's what the DA's office is there. Crime is a very serious and traumatic event. So you're always going to have tough conversations, and we need new leadership that's willing to lean into those conversations and not black out walls and put up fences.
Well, thank you for that. It's a great ending message. More transparency always leads to more public participation. So we really thank you for being here and answering all of our questions and telling you about us and also about the office that you're running for. So thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Bye.